You worked a lot with, you say you still do work with Steve Reich, and I hear a lot of his influence of his music in your creations, where you have a repetitive motif that kind of goes over and over, and other instruments build on it. And why does that appeal to you? And that's something that sounds like I'm going to hear, and it's not you, it's me.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Well, for me personally, I grew up, before I started doing classical music, my father was a rock and roll musician, and I grew up only listening to rock and roll. And then when I came to classical music, I think it was like Mozart and Bach were the first things I really heard. And then for whatever reason, it was then Philip Glass and Steve Reich were the next things. And,
Reich, okay.
Yeah, and they both made sense to me, mainly because I understood the classical element of things in it, but it was also all these amplified instruments kind of playing together in this music that was this really energy-driven type thing, kind of similar to rock and roll in a way. And I feel like their ensembles do kind of combined like a classical ensemble with a rock kind of essence. And so sonically, that world made sense to me when I was like 12 or 13, and I just thought this was like the coolest stuff I'd ever heard. And so I just kept like seeking it out, and then I was lucky enough when I was 18 to actually play for Steve, and my wife and I actually sang with him a couple summers ago in the group Nexus. We did this piece of his drumming, which is just like a masterpiece. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, his music has been a huge influence on me. And actually, I was very honored a few years ago. We had celebrations in New York for his 70th birthday, and there was an event at the Whitney. And they actually featured two pieces on the concert that were not by Steve Reich, and one was by one of the Bang on a Can founders, Michael Gordon, who I've worked with a little bit as well. And then they picked my piece, Amidst Neptune, that I wrote for Brad Lubman, who is a teacher and conductor at Eastman, but also is the conductor of the Steve Reich Ensemble. And so Steve picked that to be on that concert, and I was very honored.
Wow.
It's pretty huge. So.
What would you say to somebody who is growing up in Janesville and is maybe going through what you went through and is trying to find their place and is struggling and doesn't know how to express themselves?
I would say try as many things as possible. I mean, you don't have to be on the football team to be cool. I mean, that's a given. But it's important to just, try things out. Like, I tried art out for a while, like painting and stuff, and that wasn't really it, but I definitely did like music, and I liked all these different types of music, so I just kept trying different things out and see what shoe fits.
One, obviously not from any experience in Janesville, but an experience as having had a time where I was younger, like most of us in the room. Anyway, but like Caleb said, another way of putting it, like Caleb said about trying different things, I think one other thing that people who are, or adolescents, teenagers that feel kind of stuck or closed, is that it's not so much that they don't know how to express themselves, but they're unaware of the fact that they kind of want to or feel they need to express themselves. So the manner, and to understand that the idea of expressing yourself can be the manner in which you have a conversation with somebody, or the way if you debate, or the way you cook, or the fact that anything is a vehicle for some voice, that the voice doesn't have to attach itself to merely an aesthetic pursuit. It could be how you drive, if it's not about causing danger to somebody else. But just realizing that the only way you'll hear your voice is to do something, and the idea that expressing yourself can be something that will release you from your body and give you a sense of something that's larger, some sense of a routine that'll give you an attachment to a bigger thing. And that is hard to see that you want when you're 14. Yeah.
So, Gray, you would seem to be just an accumulation of different ways of expressing yourself. I'm looking at you and seeing at least 5 or 10 different ways in which you are expressing yourself. Mm-hmm. How did you decide? How did you realize that all of these different ways is something that reflects you personally?
Well, for some reason, I will say I have. Well, I lost my father when I was rather young, and like most people, when they have some sort of very traumatic experience that they are not completely intellectually conscious of at a very early age, that can have the effect of creating a hypersensitivity in general to social situations, so that you might be a rather affable person, but not necessarily because of some innate social sense, but rather because you're scared of how you might be affecting other people, so you try to be really aware of a room. In doing so, you become more aware of how you affect other people and how what your presence does, and in turn, you become really aware of your presence and how you become more and more comfortable with yourself. I liked bright colors. I liked presenting myself a certain way, and I wanted to do so more and more when I was basically, I just kind of always have wanted to be that way, and had a fear of doing so because I would get called a lot of names, derogatory terms for being a homosexual, which I'm not. But I remember at a point realizing that I wasn't, although that had been imposed on me by how many times people had been yelling it at me, and realizing it would be fine if I was, and I just happened not to be. And I
Right.
don't
I mean,
need
you know,
any
the camera
fear.
may not catch, but you're wearing crystal earrings.
Exactly, or any kind of stuff like that. But I guess another way to answer it is simply if you're lucky to have some sort of support system to recognize that, or to realize that speaking, or not just speaking, but that a thought that you have doesn't need to be clobbered by some negative reaction to it, that you don't need to be the devil's advocate in your own head for whatever you might come up with or something that you might want to do. I feel like a lot of kids might not do things, like there's a certain, I've doubled over, but certain listless, very ironic, sarcastic association with adolescence that is probably goes back to the beginning of civilization, and mostly has to do with some voice in your head at the beginning of an idea, or right after the beginning of an idea, saying, well, that's dumb, I'm not going to do that. And the more you can get rid of irony, I think, in terms of that age, irony is great, but the more you can get rid of it, the more it'll allow for some genuine expression.
Isn't it interesting that first you need the irony to kind of be able to understand the world and to critique it a little bit, but then you need to be able to put it aside so you could move forward and create something?
Absolutely. The only way, I mean, unless it's completely, purely ironic, in which case it is devoid of irony, you know, which is great. Frank Zappa's music is unbelievably ironic, but is absolutely about enjoying your ability and enjoying proficiency and enjoying a, you know, plural understanding of, you know, genre, you know, relationships, and might be ironic in what's humor in it. The humor is ironic, but the execution is completely not. Is completely like, I did this, I can do this.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and it's a pleasure.
Thanks.
Best of luck.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having us.